Welcome back to the shed. Today we're going to take a look at the 1963 Hugo Award-winning novel by Philip K. Dick, The Man in the High Castle. Now it's a bit of a surprise that we haven't covered Philip K. Dick here on this channel in the past, because I've read quite a lot of Philip K. Dick over the years, so it'll be really an honour if you could share some time with me as I break the plot down a little, talk to what I liked, what I didn't like, we'll make some recommendations, and then I'll rank on our Hugo and Nebula award-winning Shed Ladder, where I've been ranking all the Hugo and Nebula award-winning novels. So this is an alternate history novel. The year is 1962 and Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany have won the war. And we have this guy called Robert Childen who runs this antique shop, an antique store. And that's because the Imperial Japanese have really got a fascination with American memorabilia, pre-war memorabilia. So he runs this shop and he's been rather successful. And this guy, Mr. Tagomi, approaches Robert Childen. He's one of his better customers, because he wants to buy a gift for this guy called Mr. Baines, who he wants to impress. So Robert Childen thinks he can fulfill the order because, unbeknownst to him, he's been receiving some counterfeit goods from this Wyndham Matson company, where they've been producing all these fake guns and rifles that they can actually sell to Robert Childen. On the other hand, we have an employee, an ex-employee of the Wyndham Matson company, and this guy called Frink. He's a secret Jew because the Jews have been exterminated by Nazi Germany. So he's living undercover, and he actually happens to be working at the company, and he blackmails the WM company into paying him out because he's basically said, "Hey, I'm going to go to this Robert Childen and tell them that all these goods are actually counterfeit." So he blackmails them, blackmails a success, and he receives some money to start up his own jewelry enterprise. In the meanwhile, Frank's ex-wife, Frink's ex-wife, takes a road trip with this Italian truck driver, but he doesn't appear to be all that he seems. So meanwhile, several characters have been reading this novel by this guy called Hawthorne Abinson. So it's got a novel within a novel, and that novel is called The Grasshopper Lies Heavy. And Germany, Nazi Germany, has actually banned the books from being sold. But Imperial Japan is still allowing the book to be sold, and so several of these characters are working their way through the novel. And the interesting thing about the novel, The Grasshopper Lies Heavy, is that it also tells an alternate history of the world after World War II, wherein the Allies actually win the war. So there's a lot of interest in this novel, and they're all sort of thinking, wow, what would life have been? Not too dissimilar to what we do reading the novel when the Axis actually won the war. So the scene is set. We have Hitler with his failing health, instigating a big power struggle within the German party, the Nazi party. We have Frink's little jewelry store, and what greater part will it play in the role? We have his ex-wife on this road trip with this Italian guy, and what would that really ultimately end in? What is the ultimate fate of the man in the high castle? And what about this mysterious Mr. Baines? What does he have to bring to the story? So look, the question really is, challenge to all of the reality and the history and time as we see it today. So what did I really like? Look, I like the theme of the novel. I really like that idea of an alternate history and what would have happened if the Axis actually had won the war. And honestly, it's pretty terrifying, the sort of picture that PKD paints here for us, because, it really does beg the question, what if? And I really did enjoy that. Now, it has been done before in the 9 science fiction novels, and I think Philip K. Dick actually took inspiration from some of those novels in the past. But this is the first I'd ever read in a science fiction setting to do with the Nazi party. And it really was a very memorable idea for me, and one that is very thought-provoking. So the other thing I found really interesting in the novel is the use of cleromancy. You see, most of the characters in the novel make use of this I Ching. And it's a Chinese book of divination. And what they do is they roll a random pattern. So they'll either get some stalks and drop them into a hexagram sort of pattern, or they roll a dice or flip a coin. And basically, they would then take those results, look up this book of divination, this I Ching, and they would interpret that as the will of God, and this is the divine judgment based on the question you posed. So I found that to be a pretty interesting and very significant part of the novel. It does come up quite a fair bit, which I found was interesting. It was an interesting take that I hadn't seen before in science fiction. So for those of you who are not familiar with PKD, he was a rather interesting kind of person. He was a very troubled person, and he had a whole lot of, drug abuse and mental illness thrown in. And maybe one day I'll do a video just on PKD. But his novels can sometimes be a bit disjointed. They often deal with spiritualism or God or religion. And this book in some ways is exactly what you get when you read PKD. And it's probably more readable than some of his later works that I've read in the past as well. But look, I've always enjoyed PKD's writing, and it's no exception in this particular novel. And I've always been very impressed with his vocabulary. I just really think he had a great vocabulary when it comes to writing. What didn't I like in this novel? Look, for me, there's not really much I disliked in the novel. I did enjoy it thoroughly. But, PKD, he had some strange female characters. It's almost like he never actually met a woman or really understood how they really thought. Not that I think any man can really proclaim that, but he really has some bizarre ways of internal dialogue. When the women have internal dialogue, it just sounds bizarre. And I think anyone who's spent any real time with a woman would probably say, how realistic is this? And there's a large element of that I I don't know, have you ever actually met a woman? I've never seen a woman who thinks like that, right? But maybe, look, I'm sure there are people out there, maybe that was his experience, but I've always found that odd when it comes to his women characters in the novel. Look, I mentioned in my sort of like section that PKD can be a bit sporadic, and sometimes it's a bit disjointed, and I think some people may find that in this particular novel. But I actually did not find that. But I do see people struggling with that. But I thought it was great the way he could take these really disjointed little pieces of story going on and string them faintly together. I really thought that was excellent. I thought it was really well done. But I suspect there would be some people out there that would just not link some of those things and see it a bit of a far stretch and maybe not quite enjoying the novel overall. But look, that was not my experience, but I did want to mention it in my dislike sections because I do feel some people would actually see that and be a bit put off by it. So what about recommendations? Look, I highly recommend PKD. I've always really enjoyed his novels. I've actually got a big, massive Philip K. D book haul coming up. So if you really like PKD, I'm sure you'll love that particular episode. It's something like over 40 books, so I hope you can join me for that. But look, recommendations. I think anyone who likes alternate history novels, I mean, that was a highlight for me. It was a really thought-provoking and scary at times view of the world, right? What if, right? I really enjoyed that concept. I also say, if you like PKD and you read Philip K. Dick, then this is one of the books that you really ought to read. It is a classic in his body of works. The other thing I would say is if you like divination and you like your science fiction books thrown with a bit of, Eastern mysticism thrown in, then this is a classic for that as well. Look, it's going to be rather interesting when we go to try and rank it on our Hugo ladder. So I'm going to set up and we'll take a look at it just now. So ranking today's Hugo Award-winning novel on the Sci-Fi Shed Ladder. And we've got an A, B, and C side. I don't think it's going to make the A side, nor do I think it's going to be on the bottom end. So it's going to be somewhere in the middle. And primarily, I think the things I enjoyed the most are the things that are going to set this novel apart when it comes to the Sci-Fi Shed Ladder. It's a very thought-provoking novel. That alternate history with the Nazis winning the war, or the Axis winning the war, is a very thought-provoking one. And I think for me, it's had me wondering and thinking about it more than anything else on the board. So when it comes to science fiction concepts, I think it's one of the better ones on there. What lets it down a little for me, I think, are some of the characters. The characters are not very strong, especially the female characters. So it doesn't have, I think, everything that warrants it being on the A side. which is some reason why Ringworld is there as well, right? Brilliant concept, but the characters were a little bit weak. So I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle. And I'm just going to go straight ahead and rank it because I think this one is going to sit just above The Demolished Man by Alfred Bester. Uh, I think it's exactly where I wanted to go. And it's also very similar. I guess similar feelings when I read Alfred Bester's The Demolished Man. I got a similar feel when I read PKD, The Man in the High Castle. It's a great read. Let's just make sure we're happy with that. Is it better than Moving Mars? Yes, I think it is. Is it better than Fire Upon the Deep? Yes, I think it is. The Wind Up Girl, yes. And I think from Red Shirts Down, it's pretty straightforward. Look, it's an interesting one. I wonder where you think you'd rate this one. I'd love to hear your opinion because I know some people absolutely love this novel, and I would consider myself one of those people that highly rate the novel. I do really enjoy it. But I know there will be others that think, why did this novel even win a Hugo Award? It's terrible. It should not even be on the list. So I would love to hear both extremes, or if you're feeling somewhere like I do, somewhere in the middle. I really would like to hear your thoughts because I think it is a bit of a controversial novel when it comes to its success. Hey, I've been Peter. This has been The Shed. I'm going to cut it quick because I can hear the rain on the metal roof, which is only going to get heavier. So thank you for spending time with me in The Shed, and I'll see you next time in The Shed.